Imagine a world where justice is swift, merciless, and often public. A world where crimes are paid for, not with fines or imprisonment, but with agony. Throughout history, societies have turned to terrifying punishments to control crime and assert power. From being boiled alive to drawn and quartered, these punishments were as inventive as they were horrifying. But what drove humanity to such extremes? And why did people cheer as others suffered? Today, we're delving into some of history's most brutal forms of punishment, the chilling tales of pain and power that will make you grateful for the laws of the modern age. So brace yourself, because this journey is not for the faint of heart. Blood Eagle. One of the most infamous and feared punishments in Viking lore was the Blood Eagle, a ritual so brutal that it's almost hard to believe it existed. A condemned person, usually an enemy or a betrayer, is tied down, helpless. The executioner would make precise, deep cuts along the victim's back, exposing the rib cage. But it doesn't stop there. In a gruesome act, the ribs were then carefully broken and pulled outward to resemble the spread wings of an eagle. For those still able to cling to life, the lungs would then be pulled from the body. One of the most chilling tales of the Blood Eagle comes from the story of Ragnar Lodbrok's sons avenging their father's death. After capturing King Aelle of Northumbria, who killed Ragnar, they carved the eagle on Aelle's back, severed his ribs from the spine, and pulled out his lungs. Skaldic verse from the early 11th century cryptically mentions Ivar the Boneless cutting Aelle back with a very sharp knife. The Blood Eagle was more than just a punishment. It was a public display, a warning, and a statement of ultimate power. But historians still debate whether the Blood Eagle was ever actually practiced, or if it's a legendary exaggeration of Viking brutality. Either way, it remains one of the most haunting images from the Viking Age. Burning. Of all the forms of execution devised by humankind, perhaps none has resonated with such raw terror as death by burning. A punishment of fire meant to purify, condemn, and inflict unimaginable pain. Burning was a method often chosen for those accused of heresy, witchcraft, and treason. In societies gripped by fear and fervor, flames were seen not only as a means to end life, but as a passage to eternal judgment. In medieval Europe, the accused were paraded through the streets, forced to confront the eyes of neighbors, friends, and foes alike. Bound to a stake, they faced the dreadful moment when the fire was lit. Flames would begin to lick at their feet, climbing upwards as smoke filled their lungs. Crowds gathered, sometimes cheering, other times weeping, transfixed by a spectacle that was both horrifying and mesmerizing. Spanish heretics faced this brutal punishment during the Inquisition, as did French heretics like Saint Joan of Arc, burned in 1431. In 1555, Protestant bishops Latimer, Ridley, and Hooper suffered the same fate in England. Death by boiling. It was a punishment reserved for the most reviled criminals, traitors, counterfeiters, poisoners. Imagine a massive cauldron filled with water, oil, or even molten metals, heating slowly over a fire, waiting for its victim. The condemned would be stripped, bound, and lowered into this deadly vat, sometimes limb by limb to intensify the agony. The slow heat would sear the flesh and scorch nerve endings, while witnesses watched, captivated by the gruesome spectacle. Each cry of agony served as a lesson to onlookers, a grim reminder of the price of heinous acts. From ancient China to medieval Europe, and even in Tudor England, this terrifying punishment was used to enforce obedience, punish treachery, and send a message that there were fates worse than death. It's chilling to think of the times when such horrific methods were not only accepted but encouraged. Breaking wheel. Death by the breaking wheel was one of the most brutal punishments of medieval Europe. Reserved for the worst criminals, it involved the condemned being bludgeoned with hammers until their limbs were shattered. They were tied to a large spoked wheel, often displayed publicly, and left to die slowly. The final blow was typically a fatal strike to the head. One infamous case was Werner von Homburg, a 15th century German knight executed for treason. His broken body, displayed on the wheel, was a terrifying warning to others. Another example is Franz Schmidt, a 16th century German executioner who witnessed the horrific deaths of many condemned on the wheel. The breaking wheel was a chilling reminder of the brutal, unforgiving nature of justice in the past. Lingchi, or death by 1,000 cuts, was a horrifying execution method in Imperial China, reserved for the traitors or those who committed heinous crimes. The victim would be tied down, and the executioner would slowly slice off pieces of flesh from the body, often over several hours or even days. Each cut was deliberately made to prolong the suffering and slowly drawing them closer to death. One infamous example is Wang Ji, a military official who attempted to assassinate the emperor in the 11th century. His execution was described as agonizing, taking hours for him to die. Another notable victim was Zhang Zishong, a warlord during the Ming Dynasty, who was captured and executed in a public spectacle meant to humiliate him and deter others from betraying the emperor. Lingchi was abolished in 1905, but its legacy as one of the most brutal methods of execution in history endures, a chilling reminder of the extremes to which justice was once taken. Sawing. Death by sawing was a brutal and terrifying punishment where the victim, often suspended upside down, would be slowly sawed in half, starting from the groin or head. This method ensured the person stayed alive for hours, enduring unimaginable pain as the saw cut through flesh and bone. It was a form of execution designed to instill fear, not just end a life. This punishment occurred during the reign of King Henry VIII in 1537. Robert Aske, leader of the Pilgrimage of Grace Rebellion, was executed this way as a warning to others. In 15th century China, death by sawing was also used to publicly punish traitors and criminals, emphasizing the emperor's absolute power. This horrifying execution was not just about death, it was about control, terror, and making an unforgettable statement. Impalement. It was a horrific execution method where a victim was pierced with a long, sharp object, usually a wooden stake, through their body. The victim was left to die slowly, sometimes for hours or days, as the stake caused immense internal damage. One of the most notorious figures associated with impalement was Vlad III, known as Vlad the Impaler. His reign was marked by such extreme cruelty that it earned him the nickname Dracula. Impalement was also used by the Ottomans, who employed it to punish traitors or rebels. Sultan Mehmed II, for example, used it as a method of execution to instill fear and control over his empire.